Boom. All right. We are recording. Welcome everybody to Security Tokens Uncensored. I've got Andrew Dix from Crowdfund Insider with me again this month. So we've decided ever since that first sort of pilot episode that once a month we'll do a live Q&A version with experts, but Andrew will also bring this month's news from the STO world. So if there's any news stories we talk about on the show today that you want information about, go to crowdfundinsider.com or hit Andrew. I think it's Andrew R. Dix on Twitter, and he'll help you find the article. We'll also probably post links to each article in the blog post. I just decided. But joining us today, aside from my sidekick Andrew Dix, we've got Antonio Brasse from BlockQuake and Sean Nasiri from TokenSoft. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So I think the best way to start would be to go across the board and get an introduction from everyone. I'm just going to go by how it shows up on my Zoom recording. Antonio, tell us a little bit about yourself and about BlockQuake.
Yeah, sure. My name's Antonio Brasse. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of BlockQuake. Our first project is actually going to be a global cryptocurrency digital asset exchange, where we're really addressing a lot of the concerns out there around the one-stop shop, having multiple fiats, brand new base cryptos in there, and just having a lot of crypto options for people, as well as trading options. There's a bunch of other features that we plan on onboarding. My background, I've spent about 15 years in financial services out here in New York City. A lot of time in audit, risk management, compliance functions on both the technology and the business side. Our team has heavy regulatory experience. Actually, we're probably one of the teams out there that have probably more regulatory knowledge than a lot of other teams out there. Just everyone coming from the financial services sector, a lot of remediation planning that we've worked on in the banking, insurance, and investment sector. So we wanted to bring a lot of that knowledge to the space. Myself, I've traded stocks, options, Forex before I got into cryptocurrency. So, I mean, this was all born because I was always accustomed to a higher gradient of a trading experience, and I just saw that lacking, so I decided to jump in.
Very cool. Very cool. So we'll dive into more of your background, I'm sure, when we get the Q&A. Remember, everyone, that if you go into the Q&A section of the Zoom meeting, you can ask questions that we will start to answer after the news stories, unless it's related to the news stories. So next, Sean, tell us a little more about yourself. I've known Sean since back in the day, crowdfunding at USC, right?
Yes, sir. So my name is Sean Nasiri, and I run biz dev and East Coast operations at TokenSoft. And as Alon was mentioning, him, myself, and Andrew, who's also on the panel, were one of the early pioneers in the equity crowdfunding space. And as we were discussing before we went live, there's been a huge transition from a lot of the early people in equity crowdfunding into digital assets and security tokens, because when the Jobs Act first passed, a lot of the things we hoped that it would enable in terms of liquidity, access to capital, bringing on new class of investor, global compliance, weren't possible until the technology we have now around blockchain and smart contracts. And to transition that over, a quick little spiel about TokenSoft. TokenSoft is the leading digital asset issuance and management platform. Our fully scalable solution builds tailor-made products that help enforce our clients' unique global security, banking, and tax requirements. In addition to primary issuance and our ongoing compliance platform, we recently announced Knox Wallet, which is the first multi-signature self-custody cold storage solution built to custody digital assets and securities, which has been a hit, actually, because it combines institutional-grade security with an easy-to-use, consumer-friendly mobile interface.
Very cool. So But yeah, I'm going to want to know a little more about that. But first, Andrew, give us
a lot of loaded words in that introduction.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. So like Sean and Alon, I've been doing this for a very long time. I am the founder and CEO of Crowdfund Media Group. Our very first domain is in Crowdfund Insider. We started covering online capital formation back in the day at the beginning of the Jobs Act. That has since morphed into giving broader coverage of the fintech space. And alongside fintech, you've got blockchain and crypto, and now STOs, security token offerings. And I personally agree with probably everybody in this panel, but what Sean just said, that this is an opportunity to provide the liquidity and asset structure that we had hoped for in the early days of crowdfunding, but we never quite made it. So I'm very, very excited about this period of security evolution right now.
Yeah, it's exciting. We're in this I feel we're getting closer to an inflection point or something.
Oh, yeah.
I feel it. I'm hoping. Maybe it's wishful thinking, but I think it's exciting. There's a lot of very cool things going on. I'm going to remind everybody, ask questions in the Q&A section. Otherwise, all questions will be all the XRP related questions that Antonio Brasse got before. But let's start with the news. The big February stories. Andrew, I know you had one in particular you thought was cool. Is there one you'd like to start with, or should we start with some of the bigger ones?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to jump right into the Banco BTG Pactual news that came out this past week. This is the largest investment bank, standalone investment bank in Latin America. It's offering right now a security token based on real estate assets. I think it's more distressed assets because in Latin America, South America, you saw a huge jump and then a huge dump during the financial crisis. And now things are starting to go back up, and they believe that there's opportunity in that sector. So they're doing a token issuance right now of a soft 3 to hard $15 million coin. And I thought that was really cool because this is no startup. These guys have been in business for decades. They have billions and billions of dollars in assets under management. Mm-hmm. They have credibility in the real estate sector, and they're issuing this token now. One interesting note, though, is if you're a U.S. citizen, you cannot buy the token, and if you're based in Brazil, you cannot buy the token. But if you're a lot of other places, you can buy the token. But I thought that was pretty cool to see a more mainstream investment bank, financial firm move into the STO space with real estate.
That's really cool. Are they kind of leading with the security token talk, or is it just another investment opportunity that they've added security tokens to, sort of saying we also potentially plan, or we also plan on tokenizing this and creating this potential liquidity?
So they don't really say, at least in what I've read. What it appears to be is it's kind of dipping their toes in the water because the fund is kind of small, a bit small. They do say that they intend for the token to trade on multiple exchanges around the world. It's not ready to trade yet. I can't remember what the timeline is on that, the roadmap is on that. But to me, it appears as this is kind of a test pilot to see what they can do with other securities. And because they have this skill set, this intrinsic skill set, and offices around Latin America and North America too, this is kind of a nice opportunity to see how this will evolve for them in a kind of a small way. 3 to 15, it's not that big, especially for a company that has hundreds of billions of reals under management. I think $60 billion US is what it is right now. So I thought that was really kind of cool.
Yeah. Hey, Andrew, was there a reason that they excluded Brazil?
So it's got to be due to local regulation. I didn't dig into that, but I was reading the small, print. Obviously, if you're in China, you can't easily gain access to it. I know a lot of people have found ways to work around it to find a jurisdiction of preference to purchase something like this if they want to, but I didn't dig into that. The white paper, we did post the white paper on our site. It's obviously open to the public on their site. They've got a pretty well put together presentation page on their site.
What's the company name again? I'm sorry.
It's Banco BTG Pactual.
BTG.
And we'll share the link. We'll share the link with everyone afterwards as well. Very cool. Let's hit another one. I wanted to actually hit. There was one I was just looking at. Where did they go? Sorry, man. The Wyoming blockchain stuff. So, I mean, Andrew, I know you know more about this than I do, and I've seen the things that Caitlin has posted in all the Telegram groups, but would love, what exactly it meant this month.
So they approved 2 bills in the past couple of weeks. The most recent one had to do with digital assets being held as property, which, as I understand it, means you don't need an intermediary to hold it. They've also cleared the path for banks to provide services to these types of assets. Now, this is just one of a whole squadron of bills that have been passed into law, and I think largely due to Caitlin. She's really been kind of the champion behind a lot of this stuff, and it's really setting up an interesting ecosystem within a state. Everybody knows we got state laws and federal laws. At some point in time, depending on what the feds decide to do, you can see some friction creating here. But I mean, really, within the United States, there have been several other states that have tried to create more blockchain-friendly laws. Wyoming is the one. It's Crypto Rockies, and alongside that, we received a note from a digital assets-focused bank that is being set up now, looking to cater to all these providers that are apparently flying to Wyoming, emailing people in Wyoming to figure out what they need to do to get set up and to launch their crypto-based companies.
Yeah, I've heard of a couple people going to Wyoming. There was the Wyoming hackathon a few months ago that a lot of people went to, but I've heard of a few people going back since, saying, if they're going to pick, Delaware to be the home of their U.S. company, why not pick Wyoming? Because they're more favorable to some of the things they're doing. Antonio, as an exchange, are you looking at that pretty closely?
Yeah, we're definitely paying a lot of close attention to that. I think it's a good thing what happened out there, because it'll prevent, as we see more states do this, it prevents the overreaction of maybe some of the federal regulators that we deal with. And as you know, like I was actually in Capitol Hill a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. And it was actually a really good tone between Republicans and Democrats. There was just a lot of bipartisan support around taking their time and making sure we don't stifle industry. So I thought it was a pretty good visit down there.
Awesome. Very, very cool. And Sean, I mean, you just mentioned the custody part. If they're saying that people can sort of self-custody as part of the rules. I know security tokens and the assets that they're talking about are different, but what are your feelings? Do you have any yet?
Yeah, I mean, the custody conversation is an interesting one. Prime Trust was obviously like one of the first movers in the space when we first entered it, and they're still playing a very active role in it now. Coinbase is in the custody solution game as well. We're integrated with them. Gemini's addressing it, and Fidelity's there too, just not on a retail level. I think what I want to see is more major states addressing custody. It's pretty easy to custody and to get licenses in like South Dakota and Nevada. Would be curious to see New York and California-based ones, and obviously, what Caitlin's doing in Wyoming is super innovative. They've been doing a lot of stuff to make businesses more friendly. My personal LLC holding company is based out of Wyoming, and I had a chance to talk to Caitlin a bit at Satoshi Roundtable. So I think, you know, what they're doing is setting a good tone, and it could be a great testing ground for federal to see what works and doesn't work. But in terms of the custody solutions, I think a lot of people are trying to address it head on, and there's a lot of decent options out there. Obviously, you know, we offer both our self-custody solution and a federally insured, you know, Coinbase style institutional solution as well.
Yeah, and
Federally insured or insured by?
Institutionally backed. It's a good question, actually. I don't know if Coinbase federally insure. I don't think. Yeah, I guess they don't federally insure the crypto asset, but
I think they have an
institutional
insurance
backed.
Yeah,
yeah, it's institution backed, not federal.
Kind of like
Gemini.
Gemini did the same thing or something similar. They have like Aon as their insurance provider.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, you guys bring up a great point. As we get more structure and maturity around custody, you know, there'll be insurance that come into play, whether it's private or government.
Antonio, you brought up, since we're talking about custody, you said you were on Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you met with the blockchain caucus, met with Davidson's office. Was custody a topic of conversation that you guys discussed?
They lightly touched on it. They're waiting to see what solutions come into the marketplace. I believe we did meet with Davidson's office, a few others. The House has been much more active in this. Their big concerns were obviously the retail investor, and they're concerned with theft or loss of cryptocurrencies, as well as a lot of the KYC implications. But a lot of them are taking the wait and see approach. They want to see what solutions come out in the marketplace.
I think one of the beauties of a digital asset versus a cryptocurrency is the fact that, you know, if you lose your key, or, you know, you lose access to it, because it is tied to KYC, AML, and the issuer knows exactly who their customer is, they could always just reissue it.
Yeah.
Well,
which is a major advantage of digital assets.
Well, there are existing rules and laws of what you do when, you know, like under Delaware law, there's certain rules and laws of how you reissue a security that's been stolen or lost or whatever. And some are like archaic, like you actually lost the piece of paper, but some are more modern that protect you, right? So those same rules apply. Hopefully technology makes it easier to handle, right?
Absolutely.
Antonio, did you meet with anybody in the Senate side by chance?
Yeah, we met with a couple of, so we spent 2 full days on the Hill, and we're actually down there with Dina, Alon, you know Dina, our lobbyist. So we spent the first day, the House, second day, the Senate. The House is much more well-versed. The Senate had a ton of questions. They said that they're letting the House take the lead, but we did meet with a lot of them. Some of the other concerns that came up were how is the blockchain sector going to create jobs for Americans? So, you know, the political side of it definitely came up as well.
Got to sell it, baby.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, my number one stat that I like to use when talking to politicians, and I have to use this a lot with the 805 startup stuff that I discuss, is that the startup and small business sector as a whole is the only sector of business at the moment that's creating net new jobs. So every single other industry, whether it's banking, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's retail, they're actually over time losing jobs, no matter how big the companies are. So certain geographies cater towards big employers because it's important to their geography, but they're losing jobs over time. Startups are the only ones creating jobs, and it's the only ones in our whole country creating jobs. So that's my gut thing is, yes, this blockchain stuff might seem international and we're sending people other places, but it also, I think, should get them excited about creating regulations in this country to not send people away, right?
You would hope so.
That's actually one of the things that when we met with some of the officers, I did reiterate the point around, we want to make sure that whatever we decide regulatory-wise in the U.S., we don't want to be so at odds with the rest of the world that everything goes offshore.
Yeah. And I mean, things are digital now, so it's not like it for the average consumer, it doesn't make a huge difference, right? So if it's offshore, it's only hurting us. It's not helping, you know.
Yeah,
So
we lose our competitive edge. Yeah.
yeah. And so you know, so Andrew, let's try to hit up another story or two, because.
All right, I'm going to give some of your posse some props here, because we wrote a story about this distributed banking ledger. FinCross is launching a blockchain-based investment bank, and I had to think about that for a minute. And I'm like, why? Why would you need to do this? But I think it comes down to creating a full stack ecosystem where you can manage both traditional and digital assets more effectively and efficiently using distributed ledger technology. Now, Alon, since you know these guys well, you probably have an even better perspective on them.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought this up, because I felt like it was a little pushy to push it. Although, like, let's all be honest and full disclosure, Antonio is a sponsor of CIS and Security Token Summit, and so is Sean with TokenSoft as well. And Andrew is a longtime friend and partner. So we're all intertwined in many ways. But FinCross came on board as the title sponsor of both events. So I'm really excited about it. And I'd be excited about it regardless, because they are building something very cool. So you're right. So when they first came to me, I was like, the investment banking side, and in my head, I was thinking very small. I was thinking of helping companies raise money. But what they're doing is they're actually a licensed bank. Right now, they're licensed under Mauritius, but they're also getting other licenses in other jurisdictions. And they're not only a licensed bank for the banking side of helping people raise money, but also taking in deposits and doing things like that on an individual level. And so to be a licensed institutional quality provider, but their vision is to help individuals as well, not just institutions. It's really exciting. Their CEO is a former CEO of a large bank. They're really, really high quality people, and it'll be interesting to see how it evolves, but they're building some very cool products for the whole STO ecosystem.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, as you know, we're progressing within this regulated token blockchain ecosystem. As people are trying to innovate on one side, you have other people that are like, listen, what are some of the same exact things that happen on banking and Wall Street and in finance today that we could just replicate and make more efficient using blockchain? And I think, you know, seeing more traditional banking structures, seeing more financial structures coming into the space is a very good way to getting the old money and the institutional investors to get on board with the program, by just kind of giving them, I don't want to say like the best tasting vanilla you can get, or it's more of just kind of a fixing of some of the inefficiencies, right? 24-hour settlements, programmability, trustless automation, and a lot of things that can scale and benefit people, especially around like cross-border payments and moving large sums of capital across relatively quickly with settlement.
Yeah, and I mean, we're touching it on the Onera side. I haven't talked about Onera on this particular podcast today, but you know, the idea of regulated products in the space, whether the products themselves or like the companies are regulated, like in FinCross's case, or the actual product enforces regulation, like what we're building with Onera. I think that's really exciting to the institutional focused people. And it creates that better ecosystem internationally, right? Because if I have a similar product, whether I'm based in South Africa or Cuba or Israel or London, that actually does create a global economy. And I think that it'll eventually create some really, really cool collaborations and you know, makes the border less important, right? So
yeah.
Andrew, what would you want to hit next? Let's try to hit one more and get into some questions.
This is a big one. So Gladius, I don't know if you guys know Gladius. I actually saw these guys pitch in Manhattan way long time ago. And they did a great job when I saw them pitch, and I thought their concept was kind of cool. But at some point in time, they realized that they had done a couple things that the feds didn't like. They were raising capital post Dow report. That's the big line, the legal line in the sand about, you know, when the SEC will potentially go after you. And of course, they issued an unregistered security. And that's something that the SEC doesn't like to happen. So as opposed to waiting in the queue as to when the enforcement division of the SEC will actually find the time to go after them, they decided to self-report their infraction. And because of that, and because they worked closely with the SEC, no fine was imposed. And you guys may recall that Paragon and Air France, they decided not to do that. And those two, beyond the rescission order, beyond saying you're sorry, they got hit with, I think, a sizable fine. I think each of them got $250,000 fine. And because they self-reported, Gladius self-reported, no fine was imposed.
So yeah, it's actually interesting you bring that up. I think we're going to see a lot more companies get it from 2017, 2016, getting pinged for similar behavior. And at TokenSoft, while issuance is part of what we do, compliance is also the biggest part of what we do. And we've actually been actively working with a handful of companies that have either been proactively or reactively making sure to get SEC compliant so they can stay within good standing, which I think is a great step in the right direction for everybody. Because we don't want to see any of these companies fail. And like, I think Basis was the company that came out and said, like, we have to refund everybody because there's no way for us to maintain our business and achieve compliance. And somebody from the SEC had a comment about that, how like, all right, we must be doing something wrong if a legitimate company is unable to continue with their business here in the United States.
Yeah, and kind of to piggyback off Sean's point, just from my experience working in banking and insurance, I've worked on a lot of remediation efforts. So the one thing I've constantly seen with a lot of the regulatory bodies beyond the SEC, the Fed included, if you have a problem and you've got an action plan to actually fix it, they're willing to work with you. So I guess my message to anyone watching this is that the regulators are reasonable. Just work with them.
And it's one thing, like, if you miss on being compliant and don't dot every I and cross every T, it's another thing, if you're going out and maliciously trying to be fraudulent, right?
Yeah.
And the SEC will hopefully come down on with you with an iron fist with that. But then, I think for when it comes to dotting I's and crossing T's, is why it's important to work with companies that specialize in regulations and work with good counsel and ensure you're bringing in the right partners to enforce compliance. Because it's one thing as a startup, you can slip and fall and pick yourself back up. But, if you're a bigger corporation, which we're seeing that comes into the space, and you have a lot of professional and, personal liability at stake, then you really can't afford to slip up, no matter how small or minor the fee is or how reasonable the regulator is. Having your name show up on an SEC subpoena or with FINRA and something like that can be detrimental to a lot of things you want to do.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Do you guys have any examples of any companies as of yet that have cited an SEC ruling, them going out of business, or SEC coming down on them, putting them out of business?
The basis example was the one I saw some highlights of. I didn't take a deep dive into the article, but that's definitely the first one that comes to mind, where they had to flat out just shut down their doors instead of complying or figuring out a way to return people's money or something like that.
Yeah, I actually was just messaging with Jessica from Paragon. We'll have her on here soon, and we'll talk to her about it, which will be pretty interesting. And I'll probably have you on that one with me.
That will be fascinating, because I'm curious as to what Jessica will say about the rescission order, because that's a big question that comes up. If you're required to turn the money back, do you still have all that money? Now, Paragon, they spun it and said, we're going to become a registered security. This is really cool. We're the first. But back in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, So what happened to all that money? Did they flip it into fiat, which would have been really smart because the PRG coin had been up fairly high, and then just like all other cryptos, it tanked. And so that I'm curious to see how that evolve as more of these come out.
Cool. So stay tuned. We're going to try to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks like Paragon and AirFox are making efforts to get compliance. Tezos did the same thing. They went back and, onboarded and registered all their investors to try to achieve compliance. I think is it Kin under Kick that's going to fight it just outright. They're like, no, we don't accept.
They've got enough money to fight it.
They are going to fight
That'll be the real curious one.
But there was we wrote, actually an attorney wrote for us an article about that and went through their argument. But then after she wrote it, she was, somehow she saw a video where it showed the CEO, I forget his name, pitching it as an investment, which is something you really can't do if you think if you want it to be perceived as a utility token. So I think that hurdle for them got higher, even though they're going to fight it. At least they have plenty of money to do so, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Sean, okay, go ahead, Alon.
Oh, no. I was go in if it's on the same subject. I was going to say, let's pick maybe one more news story and go into some questions. But if you have something for Sean.
So, Sean, I wanted to ask about your relationship with the regulators, because that is absolutely vital that you have that pipeline in the, off the record, going on, where you're sending your people down there to talk with the SEC and perhaps other people. Do you have a good rapport with the regulators? Do you have that ongoing discussion?
Yeah, so I personally have not spoken to anybody from the SEC or, the judicial branch in Congress or anything like that myself. However, our office is in the same building as the San Francisco-based SEC, and I know we've had the SEC in there, and we've had the Crypto Czar in there as well, and we try to keep an ongoing dialogue with regulators, open door policy, so to speak. But our whole stance on compliance and regulation is it's not our job to interpret or provide the guidance. We more work with counsel and take our lead from counsel. But given our level of experience, we're more so like, I don't know if that's going to work. We'll kind of tell you what not to do instead of what to do, just because it's all so gray. And there's, we want to focus on tech, and we want to let the regulators focus on regulation and let the fundraisers focus on fundraising. Having like a fully vertically integrated stack in an industry this nascent and fledgling is, in our opinion, not the best route. So we try to stay laser focused on the tech, but of course compliance is what we sell.
Excellent, thank you.
Cool. So Andrew, one more article. If it's not the JP Morgan coin, I've got one question for everyone about that I just want a one-word answer.
It's not because I'd like to talk about this globally, and I'm gonna actually roll in two articles. BaFin, which is the German federal regulator for securities, which is not known for being always as forward thinking as you would want them to be. They're a little bit, German, rigid. They approved BitBond, and you probably know the guy who runs that, Alon, because they've been around for a long time, to issue digital securities. And that was really cool because it's one of the first. But at the same time, within the same couple weeks, BaFin shut down an ICO Rise. And that was because they got a little bit nervous about, too good to be true sort of thing. And those guys were looking to raise a lot of money. So on one hand, they had given approval to BitBond to issue digital securities. On the other hand, they went out and shut down a high-profile issuer.
Interesting. Was the issuer, did they say they were not compliant?
So they got quiet all of a sudden. I think that they got, the Friday afternoon letter, and they said, uh-oh, what are we going to do about it? And all of a sudden, I think they started off by saying, well, we're going to delay the offering. And then it came out in the German press that BaFin had just shut them down. So I haven't done a deep dive into this one, but I do know that Rise was looking to raise a lot of money. At the same time, you have New Fund, which has already issued their own security token for their parent company, and they did a kind of I guess an accredited round, and they're issuing the tokens now this month, and then they're going to do a broader round once they work things out with BaFin. So I thought that's kind of cool to see another jurisdiction looking for ways to move forward. Everybody's doing it at different paces. I wish the United States would pick up the pace, but you have some other jurisdictions that I think are doing a somewhat better job.
Well, I think if you look at things from like a jurisdictional perspective, as long as people operate within the existing security laws, there's really nothing the United States needs to pick up on, right? It's people are able to do digital security offerings as long as they just follow the rules that already exist. And I don't foresee the SEC changing the rules on that anytime soon. The one thing that seems to be dragging their feet a little bit is on Regulation A+.
Yes.
There hasn't been any digital assets that have been able to get approval from SEC for Regulation A+ offerings. So I think that's what's going to be important. But I think, within Germany and like the EU and stuff like that, what I've seen, and this could just be completely hypothetical because I don't have any insight into what the scenarios you just described, but if the existing government of that area is saying you can't do something, they're probably trying to operate within a local jurisdictional exemption. And different countries have like different things. Like, all right, if you raise under $10 million, you don't have to do X, Y, Z. Or if you don't have more than 30 investors, you don't have to declare this and this. And too many people, which is a red flag to us at TokenSoft, if too many people are trying to play around with exemptions that lead to them not having to do a certain level of disclosures, it's kind of like, all right, you guys can try to get cute with what's going on. We prefer that everybody just follows the highest letter of the law and operates as professionally as possible with all global regulations.
Yeah, I'm with that. Sean, do you know if we had any Reg CF token offerings?
Yes, we have. Republic's been churning them out. I think Start Engine's had a couple too. I don't have any details on any specific ones, but I know that those two platforms have put out a good amount of companies under Reg CF for unaccredited investors.
If I remember correctly, the process of launching a Reg CF offering forces you to disclose previous fundraising rounds, disclose your valuations and things like that, and report them to the SEC. But I don't think you need approval in advance the way you need to with a Reg A+. So all of these companies are dotting their I's and crossing their T's and doing it right, but they are doing them as a Reg CF because their Reg A's are not approved yet. So Antonio, when they, do you intend on BlockQuake potentially having some of these Reg A+ security tokens on the exchange?
Yeah, at some point down the road. So we are pursuing our broker-dealer ATS license. So once we can get that, then we're going to look into onboarding some of these, quote-unquote unregistered securities, because they can only go on the ATS platform, right?
So you guys have an ATS, Antonio? I'm sorry, or you're in the process of getting one?
We're in the process of getting it.
Okay, I was going to say, I thought I was fully aware whoever had an ATS in the US at this point.
Yeah, we're going through the application process right now.
Okay, awesome.
Now, I guess to that point, when we talk about security tokens, we probably have to differentiate from tokenized securities versus token offerings, right? A lot of token offerings outside the US and Canada are often not considered a security. So, one of the things we're looking to do is, if there's a gray area on a token we're listing where internationally it may not be considered a security, but domestically by US and Canada may be considered one, maybe we list it and then we just block US and Canadians from trading it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot you could do within the smart contract and within creating a lot of different siloed whitelists
Yeah.
that allow trading amongst whitelists that have compatible requirements.
Yeah.
That's kind of a very high level overview of how we regulate that kind of stuff with the offerings that we do that tend to be highly global in nature.
Yeah.
It's just creating a lot of different whitelists for the smart contracts to restrict trading between parties that don't comply with each other's standards in different jurisdictions.
Interesting. So guys, I have one question before we jump into the things. I want one word answers from each of you. Is the JP Morgan coin a good thing?
So Alon, I have a lot
One
of
answer,
friends.
one word. Yes
Can we get one sentence?
I can't. I have a lot of friends at JP. No comment.
No comment? Okay, 2 words.
My answer is yes.
Andrew?
Anytime we have buy-in from mainstream, it's a yes. The crypto community, sorry, I went over one word. But
It's okay.
It's fine, Alon. I know you would do the same if you were asked the question.
Of course I would.
There's a lot of shade being thrown from the crypto community.
Yeah.
Yes, there is.
But everybody outside of the crypto community, they've been sending me the article via text and email. I'm getting buy-in from like my parents' generation and my Wall Street friends over here in New York City. So listen, anytime a huge name brand, reputable institution puts their name on anything blockchain related, I think that's a win for us.
Yeah, and
I think of it as a gateway drug. 1 sec, guys.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can hear me, Alon, but yeah, you're going to see every bank develop their own internal transfer method. That's just how it's going to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it adds a veneer of credibility to the entire space, even though depending on, I know that some of the shade that was being tossed their way was due to the fact that some people were saying, well, it's not crypto, but still the fact that they're calling it that, it shows that Wall Street is taking a serious look at this. They understand there's benefits to the technology, and if they can execute correctly, there's something there for them and the wider audience.
Yeah, I mean, I can say from firsthand experience, every major financial institution is taking a very hard look at blockchain and crypto, some publicly, some quietly, but everyone's taking very, very serious look. We've seen buy-in from the big 4 financial institutions, the big 4 accounting firms, and I think everybody in between globally. So I mean, this is definitely real. Cool. It's just getting a lot of the buzzwords out of it, like token and coin, that leads people thinking down different routes.
I think anything that creates this mainstream exposure brings in our parents' generations and all of these others into the space, and will eventually get them sucked in is a good thing. So yep. I'm with you guys. I just wanted to hear your thoughts. I obviously agree with most of the crypto community. That's not technically like a cryptocurrency, but we can debate that later. So guys, we have about 10 to 15 minutes left. We should get into some of these questions. This first one is actually a very good one, and Antonio will have a lot to say about it. Same with Sean. So it says, can you compare the liquidity of securities today, for example, stocks, versus liquidity that companies are trying to bring to security tokens? Are these companies trying to create a NASDAQ for security tokens?
Where we're going to see a big impact is actually in the OTC market space. You've got a lot of regular unregistered securities trading, and the liquidity is just not there. So you're going to see a bigger impact where a lot of these traditional companies would want to go list via one of the OTC markets that are out there, but now they've got this cheaper option of going the tokenized route on one of these ATS platforms, fractional ownership, and you'll get more liquidity significantly in that space.
Yeah, I think it's funny that NASDAQ was put in quotes, because NASDAQ has quietly been making a lot of investments in this space. But to compare the liquidity of the public markets with private markets that for the most part only accredited investors are going to be able to dabble in, and whereas the US, it's not going to be on digital exchange, it's not going to be on actual exchanges, it's going to be on ATSs, which can act like an exchange. But I'm sure, as Antonio will explain further, like it's the furthest thing from a real exchange as we know it to be seen. I think the important thing to remember is that while liquidity is a byproduct of digital assetization, it's not the end all be all. And most companies that have gone into the space aren't building products so investors can go dump them as soon as they're open for trading, like was the case with ICOs. So the infrastructure is still very much being built. There's a lot of people going at it. I think by this time next year, it's safe to say there'll be about 25 to 35 global ATSs and exchanges or OTC platforms that are focused on digital assets. But I think we're still probably 3 to 4, maybe even 5 years away from seeing a truly liquid market, in the sense that there's 1 year that companies are subject to 1 year lockup periods. There's no real necessarily anybody providing coverage, like they do with the financial markets, on what the valuation should be, what quarterly should be, what price points should be. But they're all coming into the space. There's market makers coming into the space. There's liquidity providers coming into the space. And there is going to be some big marquee issuers that are going to have vast investor bases that are going to be able to create liquidity, but it's just not there yet. And there's no telling when it will be. But it's also not as critical as I think a lot of people are making it.
Hey, Sean, what's your perspective on 12G?
The 2,000 investor limit?
Yes.
All right. Was that a test?
No, I'm curious as to we had a big article published on this the other day, and it's a challenge, and I'm curious because
there's a couple ways to address it. One is we can build into the smart contract, and we've done so, I believe, for some companies, where we will not let the company go over the 2,000 person limit domestically, and that applies to domestic.
Okay.
On the other hand, we have companies that haven't opened up their tokens for trading because they are waiting to file an S1, which will have them act as a public company for the purposes of trading their private security past the 2,000 person limit.
Okay.
And I'm hoping we get more companies like that are perfectly okay going over that 2,000 domestic limit that doesn't apply to foreign, and are willing and able and have the gumption, I guess, so to speak, to act as a publicly traded company without having to be subject to the market manipulation and the scrutiny of being a publicly listed company on NASDAQ or the NYSE.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. I don't know, Antonio, do you have some perspective on your end?
Yeah, it's well, I'm in the same boat with Sean, where it's been limiting having that 2,000 limit number on it. I guess that's why you often see people trying to raise overseas where you don't have that limit.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so I'm in agreement with you guys. I'm going to try to move it along just a little bit, but we halfway answered the next question, which was about T0 getting off to a slow start. And people ask, what are the problems that have constrained their launch? I think it's the same thing we just discussed. Just because a company is technically public and can trade doesn't mean there's a market for it yet, and there aren't those marquees that bring the traffic. And then the last part of the question is, do you have an insight into the pipeline of STO issuance by number and dollar volume for the remainder of 2019?
That's a good question.
Yes.
So I think in 2018, there was just a little over 20 security token issuances completed. So by the end of this year, in theory, starting next year, there should be at least 20 companies that are able to trade. And I also wouldn't say that T0 is getting off to a slow start. Their token, they're just only allowing their token to trade currently. They haven't opened it up to other tokens yet. Because you got to learn to crawl before you can run. So they want to make sure they have everything right and they have their systems and processes in place with their token before they open up to other tokens. And I think Open Finance has about 5 tokens actively trading. But all those tokens, I think they only had like 15 to 30 token holders during the fundraise. So it's all a process.
Yeah, I think it's going to take time. I'm seeing a ton of potential issuances, and I say potential because just because a company is doing it doesn't mean it's going to totally make sense. and doesn't going to be successful. So a lot of the companies in our space are in it for very good reasons, and some of them are able and some aren't able to raise money. Some of us are getting into the space because they're desperate to raise money, and that's a terrible reason to do it, and they're going to fail. So just because you're going to see tons of STOs going on this year doesn't mean that they're all going to be listing a year from now.
Yeah, and you know, we share attorneys with T0, and you know, yeah. I know that you know, they're being prudent about it. They are taking their time. They know it's a new space. You know, it's a fraction of a % of the global economy, so you don't want to like run off a cliff.
And I would say probably the biggest thing that's slowing down the secondary trading, it's and even primary issuance, it's all the investor onboarding requirements that have such a digital component that a lot of the real money is just not used to and is going to have trouble doing so, right? Like somebody who's made hundreds of investments in their late 50s and 60s is going to be less likely to go through, fill out all their information on KYC AML and upload like a W-9 or a bank statement, right? So, you know, I think trying to balance digital with still trying to do a lot of things in the old school way, like onboarding investors just through back office compliance themes, through broker dealers, and taking a step back from all the technical advancements and doing some old stuff the good old fashioned way that people know how, and just using tech to create the efficiencies is really going to help with that process.
Love it. Yeah, I agree completely. So I'm looking through these questions. I know there's a bunch in here, and I want to get to some of them. I'm gonna just answer quickly. There's somebody put when STO on Coinbase. I'm just gonna answer that I may or may not have spoken to people at Coinbase, and they may or may not be taking the similar approach that some of these others are taking about, you know, crawling first, and they technically could if they wanted to through some of their systems. But I think they're waiting for a significant number of Reg A plus deals that can be traded amongst thousands and thousands and thousands of people versus the deals that are going on right now to get into the space. They have a different responsibility, in my opinion, than others because of, you know, even just look at some of the accusations they've had about leaking listings of tokens. Imagine if they leaked a listing of an STO. Now it's actually
a private security.
Yeah. So they have a different weight on their shoulders, having millions and millions of customers than, you know, T0 might have. So I think that they're going to wait until the timing is right and the market is right. I'm sure they'll be ahead of large institutions, but they'll probably purposely be slower than some of these startups coming up, which I could see by your nods, you probably agree. Antonio, do you have something to add to it before we jump to the next thing?
No, totally agree with you. I haven't worked in traditional institutions. They like to be cautious.
I think that's the dream, right? Though, to be able to have one single platform that you can access your crypto assets and your digital securities, like you do for like your Schwab or E-Trader, right? We don't have to go to a different website to trade on NASDAQ versus the NYSE, right? So having that at some point is going to be huge for us.
Yeah, I think that'll come from some kind of cross-platform situation that can do that, right? There's going to be some options there. Andrew, are you looking at the questions? Do you have any in particular? I can power through some of the ones I like.
I do have them up.
I'll hit this one up really quick, just because I don't necessarily know the difference in structure. Sean might, Antonio, you might as well. It says blockchain capital versus city block. What's the difference in any structure, and will we see Cambrian explosion of these types of funds? Does anybody know the structure? I have some feelings about what we'll see with these kind of funds, but
so I mean, listen, it's always weird when you have to comment on somebody else's companies, but from what I recall, Blockchain Capital was the first company to do a successful security token offering and the first company to do a active listing of a security token company on Open Finance. But yeah, I think both of these structures are just tokenized LP interests into their fund. And just like Is there going to be is there a Cambrian explosion of funds on Sand Hill Road? Yes. Is there going to be a tokenized explosion of a bunch of funds? There's no reason not to. I mean, we have one fund, Draper Global, which just rebranded from Andrew Capital. That's a huge tokenized fund that's trying to raise $1 billion. And we probably have 5 more in our pipeline between here and Asia. So it's not like there needs to be a cap on venture funds in any capacity, digital or not.
Yeah, no, I think that I think it's only good across the board. So, Andrew, any last question before we kind of do a wrap up, because we are coming on time, and I apologize for not hitting all the questions. Maybe we should have separate. I think we got too excited on news, and we might have to have separate webinars for questions versus news. So give me feedback also, because this is brand new, guys.
I'm looking through the questions right now.
I see one of the questions, but I want to address it at a higher level.
Yeah.
When it comes to first mover advantage, generally speaking, there's not, that's not going to hurt you. Let somebody move first. We're in the infancy. I think as Sean's pointed out a couple of times, like there's always opportunity in this space.
Yeah, I don't think there's any advantage to first mover in the tech sphere anymore. Like people can build so quickly. So it's not a question of first mover advantage. It's probably more for at least consumer facing companies. It's like cost of customer acquisition and how quickly you can scale and hit critical mass, more so than being a first mover.
And what I will say is, in this day and age where all products and services are melding together, the actual URL is so much less meaningful. All these things aren't that important anymore compared to how they were back in the day. I would think if you're building something, the number one thing to think about is the stickiness. So what makes people stick with you and stay with you? If you have a solid foundation of people who love your product and are staying with you, that's more important than, this one blast viral thing, because people just come and go nowadays. Nobody gives
Imagine if you could get a utility token that rewarded loyalty.
Yeah. I like this question though about, will STOs allow us to tokenize real estate to the point where we can long Manhattan and short the Bronx? Maybe we should short Long Island City.
Yeah, that's a.
You know what though? That I think it will get to that point with things in the future, because I think that at a very high level, everything is leaning towards this kind of technology. Everything is leaning towards being tradable in some way, and eventually, one of the reasons why you might want to have a licensed bank is to be able to offer similar institutional. So institutions already do this, right? They have these structured products where they might buy into 30 funds at once, and basically invest in the top 30 funds of Manhattan real estate versus something else. Or the same funds might invest in both and treat them differently and have a different strategy. Imagine a future where we can individually invest $1,000 into some of these structures that are only currently available to billionaires, right? These strategies sound awesome, but they're really, you have to have a significant amount of capital to be able to actually implement them, right?
I think what that analogy kind of implies is the granularity that digital tokens create. So it's like, to be able to take a long and short position on an entire city would have to imply that that entire city was tokenized and had its own balance sheet, and some part of that was become a digital asset. And then that there's a derivatives market to run a long short strategy on either of them, which I think is a little funny. But I mean, if you look at the granularity from a real estate perspective, right, you could tokenize the equity in the building, you could tokenize the physical land, you could tokenize the revenue produced off the building, you could tokenize the debt on the building, and you could even tokenize the interest on it, right? So that's kind of where it gets granular. And so I think that's kind of what
I wasn't thinking that far deep, but it's all possible. It's all possible. So guys, we've gone a little long actually. Why don't we, I would love from each of you where we can follow you, what and how we can reach you to ask you more questions. So Antonio, where should we go to?
Sure, blockquake.com or BlockQuake is our handle across social media.
Awesome. Sean?
Best way to reach me is email, SEAN, Sean@tokensoft.io, or follow my fledgling brand new Twitter that I'm trying to get a couple followers on. It's SSN95070. Mostly just retweets.
That's a good username. Andrew?
Yeah, so please visit crowdfundinsider.com. We'd love to hear back from everybody. And also you can follow me personally on Twitter, Andrew R. Dix. And also go to my LinkedIn profile. Those are probably the best ways to get directly in touch with me.
Yes, connect with all of us on LinkedIn. Thank you everyone for joining us. I apologize we didn't get through all the questions. We will do this again soon. I will have Antonio and Sean and of course Andrew. And Andrew, congratulations for your second appearance on Security Tokens Uncensored. It's an unprecedented achievement.
That's right.
Thank you everyone and have a great day.
All right, thank you very much.